what's the balance between populism and the elites? I mean, this looks like a pretty rowdy group here with their pitchforks. You really want them determining foreign policy in this country, the nuances of our relationships?
That's a really good question. Funny story about the cover of the book, because it relates to the cover. We had this very big debate. One of the big dramas in publishing this book was what should go on the cover in that crowd, right? And it started out with, like, there was guns, and there was, there's a bunch of pitchforks, and there was, it was kind of, and one of my friends said, it looks like Night of the Living Dead. Children of the Corn, right? And the whole debate, I said, I want the guns and the pitchfork, and it got down to a negotiation. I gave up the guns in exchange for the pitchfork. And I was asked, I was in the book is featured in Newsweek this week, and the reporter said, what kind of a message are you sending by having a cover with a pitchfork? And it's a good question. I think the answer is that the cover tries to symbolize the ferment out there. And our country's history is a history of uprisings. That every major thing that we look back on as an achievement came out of an uprising. The Declaration of Independence is probably the most radical, polarizing, uprising statement that's ever been written in our country. So it's talking about overthrowing the government. You have to throw off the government. I think the quote in the beginning of the book, you have to throw off the government if it starts ignoring people. So what I would say is that the country's history has been a balance of uprising pressure on politicians who use that pressure for responsible ends. Right? I mean, I was in the presidential race, as just an example. When Hillary Clinton, I'm not trying to pick on her, but when she said the thing about Lyndon Johnson and Martin Luther King, right? She said, you needed a president. Martin Luther King needed a president to pass civil rights laws. That fundamentally misunderstands how politics works and the interplay between uprisings and the political system. Politicians and parties and candidates are not social movements. Social movements use candidates, parties, elected officials, and elections as one of many vehicles for social change. And so I think it's up to the politicians who are in office to use that pressure for responsible ends. I mean, think about the uprising against the Vietnam War. I mean, I could have said, well, those folks out there marching on the mall, I mean, I don't want them making foreign policy. No, but what we wanted was an anti-Vietnam War movement that pressured the politicians to take the appropriate, responsible steps to end that war. Without that pressure, that war might never have ended. And so when Hillary Clinton said, Martin Luther King needed a president to pass Civil Rights Act, no. Social movements force politicians to do things that in many cases they don't want to do. That's, I think, not to get too deep into the presidential race, but that's, I think, the potential opportunity. That's what I hear when I hear Barack Obama speak. And I've been critical of him at certain points, but when he says, and he's trying to pretend to be a movement himself, and I understand that. He's trying to win the election, so he's doing everything he can to position himself that way. But what I hear is, if he is the president, if any of them are president, but he seems to be saying this, if he is the president, he will need us to pressure him. It's what FDR said. I agree with you, but you have to go out and help me make it happen. You've convinced me, now help me make it happen. This election is the starting point. This election is not the ending point. We don't live in a country where change comes from top down. It was Senator Sherrod Brown in the chapter that I wrote about in the Senate who said the Senate and the Congress is the last place change comes to, not the first place. And so after this election, that's when the real work starts. And that's, I know, it can be kind of a depressing kind of thing to think about. It's like, you're told the election is so important and we're all going to be exhausted after the election. It's like, oh my God, that's the beginning, not the end. But it is the beginning. It is the beginning if we want the kind of real change that we all say we want.